Howdy folks, and I'm back again. You see how I appear like magic when I'm back here in Idaho, and now I'm in Texas? Because I just appeared like I'm in Idaho from one side and I'm in Texas on the other, because I'm the master of time and space and reality, and you can bet your butts on that. Otherwise, somebody's going to say kiss my grits, because I'm not going to say that. No, because I'm not going to get her done. No. Oh, no. But here is another video that I'd like to share for everyone on my Texas road trip. This time, I'm in the city of San Marcos, Texas, home of the Texas State Bobcats of the Sun Belt Conference. And yes, I touched a real-life palm tree, because there are palm trees in San Antonio, especially riding along the freeway. You can bet your butts that's right there. And I touched a real-life palm tree because it felt so real. And I'm a palm tree fanatic, because there's no cure a palm tree disease. Okay, it's like, is it bad or good? I don't know. You don't look at me, you ask for yourself. So anyways, I'm going to be in Texas, because right now I'm standing where I'm at in Idaho, and I'm going to be in Texas in like 1 second later, or less than a second later. And also, we're celebrating our 5-year anniversary of this entire channel of Leo's Let's Plays Alliance. The Southern accent has started to be a part of me, and more like now, it's engraved in me, because not just my method voice acting, but I feel like when I'm in Texas, I can't help myself to have the Southern accent, and I feel like it is engraved or carved into me, so yeah. So by the power invested in me, I'm gonna time skip right now, so here we go. Woo! Hi there, viewers and gamers alike out there, and welcome back for another one of my videos of being here in Texas. So this time I'm in San Marcos, Texas. So I'm in I'm in somewhere in San Marcos, or whatever, so you like to call it, which is a Texas State University, home of the Bobcats of the Sun Belt Conference. So I don't know why my accent gets a little thicker than usual, because I'm in former Mexican soil, y'all. So yeah, when I feel like I'm in Texas, I feel like my accent feels like it actually fits where I belong. And then like, yeah, that makes sense when things go like this. And yeah, you saw palm trees all for this and nothing. So that right there is, yeah, you can see some of the boats, all that and all. And so little boat cruise. I take a boat cruise trip tour around this natural park life. Supposed to show you that it gets things more easier. Of course I can zoom in if I can to a whatnot, because you know that's if you guys think you've seen palm trees and you think you haven't seen any cactus plants, well, guess what? You're wrong again. So here you go. There's some cactus plants for you, y'all, and you tell me if that is not a real live cactus plant. Sorry, gotta watch out. See there, I can zoom in, whatnot, day in and day out, or even it works at nighttime or night out. Just goes to show you that is a real life cactus plant, and you cannot stop it. Makes it all the worthwhile to make it worth it. My time and my visit here in Texas. Yeah, I've seen a couple of their games, the Texas State Bobcats. a couple of their games on ESPN, though. It got me interested of their university. Yes, and I'm still in the tropics, and that's why I'm in former Mexican soil. That's why I like to get her done. I'm not trying to sound like Larry the Cable Guy, you know. It's really funny. I'm enjoying myself with family relatives, but they want to show me what is going on around here. There's some areas that are restricted, so I cannot go there, and I do not want to take a chance, because otherwise lose it and get, how do I say, leaving the premises of this entire campus, of this natural wildlife. So I'm going to show you right here, and look at that. It's, yeah, from what is what, you can see all the way to the bottom. Look at that clear water, and like there's some of the reefs is like, my gosh, this kind of reminds me of the Great Barrier Reef back in Australia, to be honest, and it's no joke. You see some of the cruises right there. Some folks. Yes, and you can see palm trees, tropical palm trees in Texas. Like, why? I thought we got palm trees in Florida too. Well, I've been to Florida, you know, so I got no offense. But being here in Texas is something worthwhile to come to. And back in former Mexican soil ever since the, you know, remember the Alamo and Goliad. All this is something worthwhile. I mean, I'm sure it'll cost money for a boat, for a boat trip tour around the this miniaturized lagoon or lake. But unbelievable. You know, also, when I watch public broadcasting shows, such as, like, you know, the shows that you go about with traveling, I would say that's worth it. But you have no idea how this is. If you want to come visit the state of Texas yourself, you should see it. I mean, look with the state of Texas yourself. You have the famous old Route 66. You have the El Camino Real, the Royal Road, if you want to know. So because I'm familiar with that name. And also the Alamo in San Antonio. Of course, you can go visit NASA, which is not too far from Houston, which is in Galveston. There's Corpus Christi, Texas, Latin for Body of Christ. You have Lubbock, Texas, which is home of the Texas Tech Red Raiders. College Station, Texas, which is Texas A&M Aggies, Southeastern Conference. Texas Tech Raiders are Big 12. The Aggies used to be Big 12. Now they're a Southeastern Conference. So, yes, major schools can move to a conference without moving the school itself, but just the conference of said division itself. You also have some mid-majors. So a mid-major is not big major like the big shots, such as like the Pac-12, the Big 12, Big 10, ACC means Atlantic Coast Conference, and SEC, Southeastern Conference. So That'll give you something to learn about. So I'm gonna go down there, and for that matter, I'm gonna do a little time skip. So by the power invested in me, I'll present you to do a time skipping right now if you enjoy the reaps, whether you like it or not, y'all.
A quick show of hands, has anyone been to Spring Lake before? Okay, a couple of people, nice. So to those of y'all returning, welcome back, and to those of y'all who have never been here before, welcome for the very first time. This place is very unique, you know, in many different aspects in terms of its biology, geology, history, plenty of cool stuff to talk about today. And we'll start our tour by going upstream towards the headwaters of Spring Lake. And these, you know, same headwaters that feed into the San Marcos River and beyond. So, pretty significant site. Evan to Emma.
That's so cool.
I'll just go to Weiss Mueller Spring and I'll avoid Crater Bottom just so they can get 78 up into the headwaters.
Copy that.
So first and foremost, you know, you may notice that building up towards the front of the boat, that is Spring Lake Hall. And it was originally constructed in 1929 as a hotel, excuse me, as a hotel initially. But of course with the Great Depression, nobody's had the disposable income to go stay at a hotel. So that quickly fell by the wayside, and it's been repurposed several times over. At one point I think it was an academy for children. At another point it was like a sanitarium, which was like a health hospital resort, kind of how it's been described to me. And the main draw were these mineral springs, right? And you know, it's also functioned as a hotel a couple of different times, including when this area was owned and operated by Aquifer Springs Theme Park, which I'll talk about a little bit as we go along. Since about 2002, it's been home to the Meadow Center, which is the organization that run through Texas State University. They're the ones that employ us and, you know, maintain and run these boats. But you know, mentioning that history, you know, it's worth bringing up, especially with our first site down below, where we get into this deep depression in the lake. This is going to be our first spring we're looking at today. So it's a little grown over with some of the plants, but that little bald patch of bright white limestone sand is actually indicative of a high pressure spring, which is a crack or crevice in the lake bed where water is basically rushing out from underground. This particular spring is named Weiss Mueller Spring after Johnny Weissmuller, who was an Olympic swimmer turned actor. He played Tarzan in some of the first iterations of Tarzan. That, you know, that's one of the things he was most notorious for. And he visited when this area was still owned by Aquifer Springs in 1965. And the reason that particular spring is named after him is because one of his big things, his big showings, was to jump into, you know, bodies of water, typically with some like alligators in it, you know, because he was Tarzan and all that kind of stuff. In this particular case, the big thing was he dove down into that and basically stuck his face into the crevice to take a drink from the spring, which sounds crazy, and that's because that is crazy. That's a crazy thing to do. Like some people say jump from a boat, but other people say jump from that observation deck. You know, details of the story vary. But it was actually not as crazy as one might think, because this water, you know, all this water that we're seeing here that's super clear, really, really clean, it meets EPA standards for safe drinking water. And that's because it's all this water, you know, it's sourced from the Headwaters Aquifer, which is this this very large water table, subterranean water table that's fed by precipitation. So as rainfall permeates through the limestone bedrock and through the soil, not only does it, like the different size pores kind of catch physical debris, but you also have tree roots and other plant roots that basically absorb dissolved minerals and metal ions, and in the process kind of filter and almost purify the water, so by the time it comes out, it is safe to drink. That being said, do I recommend it? No, you know, you may want to, you know, skim it, filter it again. just so you're not getting a bug in your water or something like that. But in a pinch, if you need it to survive, this water is safe to drink. And that's important considering, the Headwaters Aquifer, which is the source of all of this water, it's all this precipitation that is sunk into the ground, into that subterranean reservoir, and then comes back out through our springs. The Headwaters Aquifer is also the source of drinking water for upwards of 2 million people all throughout Central and South Texas, especially in San Antonio.
This is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, the water clarity here, we get about 80 feet of visibility, which is, I don't know if anybody scuba dives or snorkels, but that's comparable to the tropics. If you were to swim in the Caribbean, you can see for a pretty long way. And that's really important, of course, for our plants. You can see it's highly vegetated down there. And, there's a couple other unique characteristics of the water, such as the fact that it stays 72 degrees all year round, because, the water's heated underground before it comes up again. Important for some of our more sensitive isn't quite the right word, but some of our indicator species, like our salamanders and fish and turtles. As we kind of pass along this way over to the left of the boat, it kind of looks a little innocuous now, or inconspicuous now, right? It's just that cove there. We got some buoys, but when this area was owned by Aquifer Springs, this was their big claim to fame. They had this large submersible submersible building over here that could sit upwards of 30 guests. They'd seal off the doors and basically submerge it underwater. And the reason they would do that is because they would have these underwater acrobatic shows featuring actresses who'd be dressed as mermaids and underwater clowns. And another big attraction, a big draw for here was Ralph the Swimming Pig. It was actually a series, a lineage of piglets, if you will, that they swapped out every couple months when the pigs got too big and unruly for trainers to handle. But yeah, that was the big thing that would bring people here. Nowadays, this area is used as a diver training facility, so we have those buoys marked off because we often have novice classes of divers who maybe can't control their buoyancy. So when you don't let them out in the rest of the lake, when you can't control your buoyancy and you have a motorized boat with a propeller, it's kind of a recipe for disaster. Yeah. That being said, directly ahead of us, we do have some of our trained volunteer divers. And they're different in that not only do they have their certification, but they also have a separate round of certification to specifically dive here in Spring Lake. And we rely pretty heavily on our volunteers to do a variety of tasks here, such as removing invasive species, picking up trash, and clearing some of our springs of debris and other blockages. So where we're going, we may be able to pass over them kind of briefly here. There they go. So they're doing what we call underwater gardening, or lake bed gardening. And they're basically skimming the bottom of the lake for invasive plants and excessive algal growth, and basically send it floating to the surface so that the surface can be skimmed by this large boat that we'll see a little bit later as we continue downstream.
How often do they have to do that?
They come out here, it depends on the time of year. Now that it's warmer out, they come out a couple times a week, maybe 2 or 3 times a week.
We passed him, he's back here.
Yeah, Spring Lake has had a series of problematic invasive plants and animals and different things like that. Hydrilla and water hyacinth, for instance, were these really noxious weeds, invasive and exotic flowering plants from South America that would cover the lake bed. And they were the big problem for a while, but now our big issue is this plant right here called Hornwort. Kind of looks like a Christmas tree if you dumped it underwater. Yeah. It's a native invasive, meaning it's local to the area. You find it naturally occurring in Texas. Invasive just meaning that has a really detrimental impact on the environment, and the reason why is twofold. A, they don't have any roots, so it's a floating blanket of vegetation, and B, it can grow up to 2 to 6 inches a day. And while one end might be dying, the other end is still growing. They just replace themselves. And where it clears out, this is the old riverbed, and that kind of plays into the story of Hornwort. Spring Lake was dammed up in 1849. The dam is, still in place at the very end. We won't go that far downstream, but prior, this would have been a continuation of the San Marcos River, and a river in its own right, really, with a much faster current, not much wider than this boat is long, and it would have carved through this particular section of what's now the lake bed. That and hornwort, it's not a plant you find in rivers. It gets carried away with the current. But since the current's been kind of stopped up and we retain a lot more water, unless we manually remove it, there's not really many animals here that eat it, so it doesn't have a lot of herbivory to kind of keep it in check. And it can kill a lot of our native plants that animals do eat, such as our turtles. So we have to manually remove it, else it'll choke out the lake.
So y'all do manually remove it?
Yeah, and that's what our divers primarily do. They'll send it floating to the top, and then the university basically skims the lake for it, and then they process it into compost. Yeah. And we do that, we do a lot of efforts to remove invasive species because we have a couple of endangered and threatened species here that made use of the riverbed, and now this is kind of like one of their last strongholds because a lot of the river further downstream is impacted by habitat fragmentation and the effects of human recreation. And, namely like the San Marcos salamander is a threatened species of amphibian, and then we have the endangered fountain dart, which is this tiny little fish, and both of them live a similar lifestyle in which they kind of crawl along the lake bed, hiding between the rocks. But of course, when their habitat gets grown over by hornwort, then you're not going to find them there. So they're among many other species of concern that we were making these efforts to protect them.
That is a lot. Lots of aquatic plants.
Look at the fish.
Oh yeah, I see it. Yeah, there it is.
Oh, what did you see?
Just a fish.
Oh yeah, wait, was it pretty big fish that have a black stripe along its side?
I think so.
Kind of greenish. That may have been a largemouth bass. We have about 25 species of fish or so, and bass included, a couple different types of sunfish, and one of my favorites are the spotted gars. Yeah, they're a little more uncommon, and they're kind of secretive because they are ambush predators. You don't see them from the boat. It's not a guarantee, but we do have them in the aquarium. So if y'all have the time, it's located on the first floor of Spring Lake Hall, totally free of charge too.
So that's why they hide in the shadows.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they got some crazy camouflage. There was one time I was cleaning up an activity from a field trip up at the Headwaters, and it involved basically we just were rinsing off some of our Tupperware and bins and stuff in the water. And I didn't realize it, but there was a gar about that long floating right next to the dock, and I just dunked my hand in front of its face, and then it turned around and swam off so quickly that blink of an eye and it was gone. I was like, whoo!
That scared you.
Yeah. The nice thing is they're not really aggressive. I wouldn't worry about being bitten. It was just the fact that it was in front of my face and I didn't see it. And I was like, whoa.
See it?
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Should I say insane?
Yeah, they're crazy. They got about 500 teeth in their jaws and their throat, to snag.
500 teeth?
Yeah, they're characterized by this really long snout, and it's just lined with sharp little needle-like teeth.
Wow.
So, like I said, they're not aggressive, but you don't want to be bitten by one. It'll mess you up.
Thanks for the tip.
Yeah. They're the only variety of gar we have here, but Texas has 4 species of gar, including the alligator gar. So when kids come out here, they're like, "Is that an alligator gar?" And it's like, close, but I wish. That would be awesome.
I see it. Oh my God. It's incredible.
So down below us here is our next site. Not that much to look at, I'll be completely honest with you. It's basically a pipe. There's a stack of bricks along in this area somewhere, and then some rebar left over from this big grid network that's kind of sticking out of the ground. But the significance of the site is pretty cool. This area in the 70s and 80s was an active archaeological dig. We call it ARC site for short. And it was led by Dr. Joel Shiner and colleagues with the express purpose of what is there? You know, like what kind of artifacts can we find here? What kind of animals lived here? What kind of people lived through this area, etc., etc. Basically to help like flesh out our knowledge of the history and archaeology of the site. And I mean, they kind of hit pay dirt because they, in just this one little area, they found thousands and thousands of artifacts. You know, of course, some of them like partially fragmented or broken, but many others whole, including arrowheads, like spear points, different like little tools and implements for like sewing clothes or like chiseling into bone, and by various people. You know, many different groups with like characteristic methods of making their tools. They could tell like every 1,000 years or so, there's like new waves of indigenous peoples using the spot. And they also found a variety of animal bones as well, including the vertebral bones and teeth of bison. They also found bear teeth and bear claws. And some of the oldest bones they found included mammoth teeth from the last ice age. And that pipe down there they used to dredge up mud and drain some of the water so that they could get a better look at the artifacts and uncover them, because of course they're digging underwater. It's kind of a complicated spot, but and some of those artifacts are also on display in the aquarium as well, so highly recommend checking it out. Yeah, there's a long history in this place. One of the oldest human-made artifacts they found belongs to the Clovis material culture, where there's a couple parts to that name. Material culture meaning we haven't found any of their like human remains. We've just found like tools or refuse that they've left behind that are characteristic to them. Like you find it and you're like, okay, this was made by them. And you can tell it, and you can date it to when it was made. And then Clovis comes from the city of Clovis, New Mexico, where the artifacts were first discovered. So they're a bit mysterious, but what we know of them, they're like archaic, like a proto-Indian group of people living out here, and highly migratory hunter-gatherers, which, you know, when you have all this fresh water, it's drawing in the bison and the mammoths, of course, you're going to have the hunters following along with them. And their spear point dated back to about 13,000 to 14,000 years ago or so, pointing to this area being one of the most persistently inhabited places in the state, if not the country. And of course, the big reason why is, since these springs have been open, they've never once dried, at least not completely, even in times of severe drought. So, you know, imagine you may migrate a couple 100 miles a year, you know, with no guarantee of fresh water or, you know, food, and then you hit this place, kind of hit pay dirt. You know, you got fresh water that's just coming out of the ground. And to you is basically a miracle. You have animals coming in from the plains, you know, making use of this site, and then of course you have this nifty little escarpment, which the Spanish named the Balcones escarpment, because when indigenous people would sit on it, it would look like they were sitting up in a balcony that you could use to survey the territory and survey for your prey animals and for allies and enemies alike. This is a pretty good, this is a sweet gig. So they may not have permanently lived here, like of course they didn't make any permanent settlements or buildings, but you would see they would repeatedly revisit the site many times over, and many different groups would come through and utilize the spot just because, you know, it's guaranteed water and basically guaranteed food. That being said, you may have noticed like the lake is steadily getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And that actually kind of ties into the human element of this place as well. Where we're over now is called Deep Hole, very creatively named. And it's about 28 to 30 feet deep or so. Even prior to this lake being dammed, it would have been the deepest section of the river. And a couple other unique things about it, besides being the deepest point, is that it's one of our largest sets of springs. As we kind of come over this way, you may notice this large crack, this crevice. It's basically the mouth of a cave down into the ground that opens to the Edwards Aquifer. It's our largest high-pressure spring, and then it's also a nice collection of low-pressure and high-pressure springs down there. You know, when the Spanish arrived, like I said, this lake wouldn't have been dammed, it would have been a river coursing through this region, so, you know, the current would be strong. And then, of course, we don't have like 2 million people tapping into the aquifer to be drinking the water. There's not like an industrialized society making use of all this groundwater, so there was more available. So the current was even more powerful than it is today, which, I mean, the turnover for this lake is like basically recycles this lake every 24 to 48 hours. So the springs we basically have a new lake every 1 to 2 days, and that's with everybody using the water. That's not to say it's not exhaustible, but like, just think of it like you're the Spanish arriving like 1700s or so. You basically see this churning cauldron of water that's just erupting from the ground and spraying out this way. It's pretty crazy. This site was also very spiritually significant to indigenous groups that are still extant, like they're still with us today and local to the area, namely the Qualateca or Qualatecans, including the Mayacan Garza tribe, which is the tribe local to San Marcos. And I bring them up because that set of springs, this whole area here, is culturally significant in their folklore and in their belief system, where these springs are the center of their creation story. So for an abridged version of the story, you can find a full version of it animated on YouTube. Basically, they believe their ancestors were spirits who lived underground and were led up to the surface with the help of a couple different animal spirits, and basically lugged up onto the shore there, where that peninsula stands today. And so to commemorate that, they will throw a powwow each year where thousands of people will gather and celebrate like traditional garb and clothing and dancing and food and music and all sorts of different things. And it's really a sight to see. The last year or two it's been interrupted because of COVID, but this year they're looking to resume in October, I believe. So knock on wood that will come to fruition. But yeah, very interesting stuff.
Oh, I see it.
Also, this way is our wetlands boardwalk. I don't think I've mentioned that quite yet. There's like an inner loop and an outer loop, where the inner loop kind of goes through the forest in the riparian section, which riparian just means riverside. And then there's an outer loop which has a floating dock segment that kind of leads you out into the mudflats that way. We have a variety of migratory birds that come through and nest in the wetlands. It's also turtle nesting season, so we have some turtles out and about looking for a place to lay their eggs. If you see a turtle, don't pick it up because it's a stressed out mama looking for a place to deposit her eggs. And then for our common snapping turtles, it's actually their breeding season, so you may see some of them kind of out and about as well. And they can get like this big, their shell can get like this big around. They're kind of crazy, but that's also completely free of charge. So if you have the time, I highly recommend just kind of taking it all in, taking in the lush spring greenery, looking at the fish and birds and turtles and such. There's also some like informational plaques and stuff out there with some more information on native and invasive species that have in the area.
Oh, I saw it.
You would see.
63 requesting docking assistance. Alright, cool. Alright, so I'll bring the boat back to the dock. As I'm docking, and when we get closer, we have 2 ropes up at the front that they'll tie off the boat with. But the cue that y'all are safe to stand up and exit the boat will be when they open up the gate for y'all. So prior to that, I just ask that we remain seated, just because, it could shake the boat. They're trying to still tie the ropes, and we're not, secure at that point. But once the gates open, they'll push that roof back a little bit. Gates open, that'll mean y'all are good to stand up and exit. And when you do, when you get off the boat, once we're docked, we make a sharp left. It'll bring you to Spring Lake Hall, where that aquarium I mentioned is earlier. Again, free of charge, no extra ticket needed, so I highly suggest it, especially because it's air conditioned. It's pretty nice. And then if you get out of the boat, immediate right, you can head down the trailhead this way to our wetlands boardwalk, which I recommend if you got the time. It's like a 1/10 of a mile walk, so you can take it, as slow or as quickly as you want to without having to dedicate too much time to going out there. So I recommend it you know, the goal is just to relax today.
Is here, and Emma and Justice both have boats right now, so they're going to head straight to the boat dock.
Oh, good thing I'm coming in. We'll pass over our divers again.
Diver.
Yeah, so you see that water's a little bit murkier now as they're pulling up those plants, kind of disturbing some of the sediment. And a lot of people are like, oh, shame that the mermaids aren't here anymore. And that's about as close as we get to mermaids at this point.
Do you know when that stopped, when they closed that down?
They closed down in about 1994. It is a long time coming. A couple culminating factors led up to them being forced to sell. And the fact that they sold to the university, I think, was more just to alleviate debt and fast. But the university bought it with the premise of using it for education and research.
Yeah.
So Ralph the Swimming Pig and the mermaids, it's kind of hard to argue their merit for like education or research. But these boats are a nice holdover because you know you can take out field trips, which they will right after this, and we can take y'all out and explore it together and talk about this spot. So I'm glad these survived at the very least. But yeah. And thank you all for coming out. Every time, you know, people come out on the boats, the tickets go to helping renovate and restore this area, keep our facilities updated. They're actually going to do a big renovation on Spring Lake Hall and revamp the aquarium and everything in there. So maybe in a couple of years, y'all visit again and see what we've done with the place. And of course, they help with conservation efforts of, you know, maintaining the integrity of the ecosystem out here. So every little bit helps, and we appreciate y'all coming out.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
So I was wondering if you guys enjoy this little educational information to understand from what was going on. So I decided I'd do a little demonstration of my own as to, how do I say this, make your own watershed. You live in a watershed, you know which one. Pollution on land washes into our waterways, so either that or make your own little island. So watch what happens when I pour some sand. I think it was like squan, because the overhead of this holographic imaging is like purely fantastic. So watch what happens. As you can see, I grab this bucket of sand here. Yeah, you can see, imagine, like, yeah, it is just absolutely amazing. When I move it, it moves like it. And watch what happens when I pour this. See that? That is absolutely amazing. And it becomes a little island, and it becomes like a huge one. Like, watch as I make this more and more hillier. Like, yeah, you see right there, like, yeah, that's impressive. Look how it grows. So if I take that away, and look what happens next.
So really quick walkthrough. So now we're going to go on to our next activity.
Yeah, that's impressive, isn't it? Amazing.
Follow me.
Yeah, it becomes like crystal clear water. Like, I know it sounds crazy, but it's absolutely looks like magic. When I pour the sand, becomes like a huge island, like right there. More and more of it, and it becomes bigger. Thanks to the holographic overhead imaging of this latest advanced technology. Yeah, you see that, and that's how it happens. Becomes like a foothill to a mountain to an island. My gosh, it's absolutely incredible of this fantastic imagery. So watch what happens when I take the sand away.
Oh.
Yeah, that happened. It absolutely happened. Like, yes, the imagery of this overhead just changed, and you can see this clear water all of a sudden. Wow. Yeah, it looks like magic, doesn't it?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, it's
Creating a dam.
creating a dam.
And creating a lake right there.
Oh, definitely. Look how that works. That is absolutely incredible. There's the lake, its own lake right there. Thanks to this holographic imagery of this latest advanced technology with the overhead, we got ourselves a lake.
In a mountain.
And a mountain right there. It is just as simple as that. That is absolutely incredible. Of course, you can do whatever you like to have your own island, your own lake, or your own watershed, whichever you like to call it.
Wow.
That is absolutely incredible. Yeah, all this and everything is worth it. Wetlands. How to protect a wetland, of course. That's what... In the box? What's inside the box? Then open the lid to find out if you're correct. Some type of bone, like a claw. Really strong claw. What is it? Oh, some type of, looks like a claw of some sort. I bet you can see it, but yeah. Bays and estuaries, if I said this correct. Bays and estuaries are bodies of water along the coast that are partly surrounded by land where fresh water from streams and rivers mixes with salt water from the ocean. This delicate mixture of fresh and salt water creates unique brackish water ecosystems. Why is it so important? Supplied by rivers and streams, estuarine ecosystems, if I said that name right. I know ecosystems, I know how to say that. That name, I don't know if I said it correctly or wrong, but leave a comment section below, just not in the chat box only. Shelter and feed marine fishes, shellfish, birds, and other wildlife. In addition, these ecosystems are important nursery grounds for nearly all juvenile finfish and shellfish found in Texas bays. Seasonal timing of freshwater inflows is important for providing proper conditions for most estuarine organisms. How to protect it. So yeah, the fragile balance nature has created must be protected to conserve bay and estuary ecosystems. Freshwater inflows must be maintained in order to produce balanced salinity levels. Conservation of our bays and estuaries can be furthered through efforts to preserve and restore wetlands and seagrasses to reduce erosion, filter pollutants, and improve water quality. And yeah, that's what you see. The Gulf of Mexico. Yes, and besides boats, there can also be surfing. Texas coastal habitats provide homes for hundreds of ecologically and commercially important species. The health of these species is highly dependent on water quality. The Gulf Coast provides fishing, boating, surfing, and many other recreational opportunities. How to protect it? Conserve the Texas Gulf Coast by monitoring the quality of coastal waters and sediment. prevent noxious fish kills caused by non-source point pollution such as nutrient loading, toxic chemical releases, degrading activities, agricultural runoff, coastal development, trash from offshore oil rigs and ships. Keep waterways clean and protect bays and estuaries and participate in beach cleanups. There you have it. Pretty amazing now, isn't it, y'all? And you say there aren't any mountains in Texas, just far western part of Texas, which you go to the ways to El Paso. That's the Gulf of Mexico. Lots of marine life, to be honest, so it's time I would do another time skip by the power invested in me, y'all. We are time skipping right now. Now that was educational now, wasn't it? You see something what you don't see every day, because when I did a little experiment, it is absolutely amazing to see this advanced technology, or what they make is something out of this, and especially what you saw in the ecosystem. It's like seeing the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. Oh, but I'm in a boat cruise to check out the lagoon of this entire little lake or lagoon's ecosystem around here in the Texas State School campus. Really amazing. And I really like it. I really do, to be honest. But besides enjoying the Alamo, which I really like to go back to the state of Texas, and not to mention, I've enjoyed Whataburger. So yeah, for those who say, you haven't been to Whataburger? Yes, I have. I enjoyed the taste of coffee and the food, and it was delicious because it's like similar to Jack in the Box. And yeah, I've been to Whataburger, and there's Dunkin' Donuts. So you can bet on that. Don't tell this a secret to everyone, but somebody likes Dunkin' Donuts in the family. So yeah. You know, when it comes to experiments, always challenge to test it out. But you know, you'll never know until you find out what it is. So tell me, what do you guys think of checking out that ecosystem, and not to mention a little boat cruise around in Texas State University, home of the Texas State Bobcats of the Sun Belt Conference? And I did check out their football games, and not to mention forgot to mention that I'm posting some pictures around, posting pictures of in the state of Texas while I'm in, and not to mention this and that. So it'll be on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and perhaps on YouTube if you might want to catch my drift, y'all. So anyways, tell me what you think and leave a comment section below on the video. As your friendly neighborhood superhero who likes to take chances making mistakes and getting messy, who likes peanut butter and chocolate and or breakfast for dinner, who takes chances making mistakes and getting messy. Godspeed, play safe, and shalom. Remember to fight with honor, love, truth, and justice, and I'll see you guys next time, y'all. Yahoo!